On this edition of Primetime News, the focus gradually shifts to what Korea can do to prevent future incidents like the MERS outbreak. Meanwhile, Samsung's vice chair makes a public apology over Samsung Medical Center's failure to stop the spread of that virus. Korea's total savings reached a 17-year high in the first quarter of this year. Unfortunately, one driving force behind that trend is the need to save up to pay off debts. A United Nations Human Rights Office officially opens in Seoul. Its purpose to closely monitor and document North Korea's human rights abuses. Stay with us with these stories and much more. It's 10 p.m. here in Korea. Welcome to Primetime News on this Tuesday, June 23rd. I'm Daniel Choy.
And I'm Hwang Ji-hye. Thank you for joining us. We start off with the latest developments on the outbreak of Middle East respiratory syndrome, which has gripped Korea.
Just as the spread of the virus seems to be getting under control, 3 more cases were confirmed today.
And to tell us more, we turn over now to our Myung-gil at the News Center. Myung-gil, give us the latest.
All in all, the numbers are very encouraging. They indicate Korea continues to make progress in the ongoing battle against the virus, as no new MERS-related deaths were reported as of today. Look at the latest figures. Korea has confirmed a total of 175 infected patients and 27 deaths. More importantly, 54 patients have made full recoveries and over 10,000 people have been released from quarantine. Meanwhile, the country's 14th confirmed patient, known as a super spreader who transmitted the virus to a total of 80 people, was cleared of the virus and discharged from hospital today. There was an alarming update, though. It was reported that one of the newest patients to be diagnosed with MERS, a 70-year-old known as patient 173, was infected but not placed under quarantine for 9 days later, until after symptoms of the illness began to show. The patient is said to have caught the virus at Gangdong Sacred Heart Hospital in Seoul, which has since enacted a voluntary shutdown of most of its operations.
And there was also a story that emerged today about the pregnant woman who was diagnosed with MERS.
Yes, Chie, a 39-year-old pregnant woman who tested positive for MERS on June 11th went through special medical care as she was nearing her due date. The health ministry said she had fully recovered from the disease on June 22nd, and early this morning she gave birth to a son through C-section. This marks the first case in the world where a mother and child have both survived the MERS virus. They are said to be in good health, receiving postnatal care at a hospital.
Well, a reason for congratulations in many levels for that case. Well, in terms of ongoing countermeasures against the outbreak, Myung-gil, it seems the government is clamping down on the possible spread of the virus through airports.
That's right, Daniel. Korea's Transportation Ministry has decided to ban people who are quarantined at home for possible MERS symptoms from getting on domestic flights starting Tuesday. This came at the request of the Health Ministry following the case of a MERS patient boarding a domestic flight to Jeju Island, which resulted in 14 cabin crew and 8 airport staff having to be quarantined. A total of 14 airports in Korea are now required to check all passengers for quarantine records when issuing boarding passes at airports, so travelers should be aware of this and plan to arrive at airports a little earlier than usual. This has been the latest on the MERS update. Back to you.
All right, Myung-gil, thanks for that report. Now, Samsung, one of Korea's biggest conglomerate, is in hot waters as many MERS infections have been traced to its hospital. And
today, the heir apparent to the Samsung throne bit the bullet in the face of that mounting criticism.
Lee Jae-yong actually issued a rare public apology, and our Han Da-eun has the story.
Samsung Medical Center failed to contain the spread of the MERS virus. We have caused too much pain and concern for the Korean people. I extend my sincerest apologies.
The Samsung scion, Lee Jae-yong, deeply bowed his head before the press and the public on Tuesday. The rare apology comes as Samsung Medical Center became the center of MERS transmissions in Korea, accounting for nearly half of the total number of MERS patients in the country. Some 80 people are believed to have been infected from patient 14, the super spreader, at the hospital's emergency ward. An embarrassment for Samsung Group's hospital, which was touted as one of the nation's finest hospitals. Lee seemed determined to make immediate changes.
In the wake of this incident, we've decided to improve our medical facilities and environment, including the ER, and build more negative pressure isolation rooms to make our patients feel at ease.
Lee went on to pledge full support for future infectious disease prevention efforts.
We will actively support disease prevention efforts and vaccine development to better deal with future disease infections.
In response to questions from reporters on whether the Middle Eastern virus will continue to spread in Korea, President of Samsung Hospital's Hwang Ji-hye said, although the battle with MERS will not end immediately, it's likely to wind down from this point on, with just a sporadic number of cases occurring now. Han-daeun, Arirang News.
And the MERS outbreak continued to dominate the parliamentary interpellation session, now into its third day at the National Assembly.
Rival parties were united in their criticism of the government's failure to contain the virus early on. Park Ji-won tells us more.
Facing a barrage of criticism at Tuesday's interpellation session, Health Minister Moon Hyung-pyo apologized for the government's failure to swiftly deal with the outbreak during the initial stages.
The public's concerns are growing daily due to the MERS outbreak. As health minister, what would you like to say to the public?
I'm very sorry that the ministry has failed to swiftly stabilize the situation in the early stages. The ministry did not have enough information about the disease at that time.
The minister said the government referred to a simple manual distributed by World Health Organization in the initial stages, failing to take Korea's unique hospital culture into consideration, which caused the virus to spread quickly. The health minister added that officials have taken measures to prevent the further spread of the virus, including shutting down entire hospital wards when necessary. However, former presidential candidate and former chairman of the main opposition An Chol-soo pressed the minister to step down from his post.
Don't you have any intentions to resign from your post voluntarily?
I am not avoiding responsibility in any way, but I think now is the time for me to carry out my duties to quickly contain the current MERS situation.
Government measures to counter the drought in the nation's eastern and central regions, estimated to be the most severe in 42 years, as well as urgent educational tasks like expanding the nation's childcare services, were other topics of the session. The four-day interpellation session will conclude on Wednesday, with its final session to focus mainly on the nation's political issues. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
The United Nations has launched a new office in downtown Seoul. It will be in charge of investigating Pyongyang's human rights abuses with the hope of securing ultimate freedom for North Koreans. Our Hwang Ji-hye reports.
The UN opened the doors of a field office in Seoul on Tuesday, aimed at monitoring the dire human rights situation in North Korea. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Zeid Ra'ad Al Hussein said the new office promises to take the United Nations human rights system to the next level.
The Seoul office will monitor and document human rights issues in the DPRK, building on the landmark work of the Commission of Inquiry and Special Rapporteur. We firmly believe this will help lay the basis for future accountability.
The setup of the office was just one of the recommendations of a groundbreaking UN report published in February of last year. The report brought widespread attention to the rampant human rights violations in the north, including torture, starvation, and forced abortions. The field office in Seoul is expected to serve as a bridge between the international community and civic groups to strengthen collective efforts against the abuses. South Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se expressed hopes that it will contribute to bringing ultimate freedom to people in the north.
As we open the North Korea Human Rights Office, let us work together so that one day the people of North Korea will come to enjoy the same equality, dignity, and freedom they so rightly deserve.
The new office, however, is expected to deal a heavy blow to inter-Korean relations. North Korea has slammed its opening, calling it an unpardonable provocation and warned of starting a war against it. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
And in another move seen as a blast to the opening, 2 South Koreans detained in North Korea have been sentenced to life in prison by the regime. North Korea's state-run Korean Central Television reported today that Kim Guk-gi and Choi Chun-gil were charged with spying on the regime under South Korean orders and have been sentenced to life of hard labor. South Korea's unification ministry slammed the move, calling it an unjustified action that goes directly against international humanitarian values. Pyongyang first announced the arrest of the 2 men in March, accusing them of working as spies for Seoul's National Intelligence Service at China's border city of Dandong. Currently, 2 more South Korean nationals, a missionary and a university student, are still detained in the north.
The U.S. government has thrown its moral support behind Korea and Japan's efforts to improve their bilateral relations. This comes after the leaders of both countries attended ceremonies at each other's embassies on Monday to mark the 50th anniversary of normalized relations. Our Connie Kim shares some experts' views on whether the apparent thaw could signal a new chapter in bilateral relations.
Washington welcomed a possible indication of improving Korea-Japan ties. Korean President Park Geun-hye and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe both expressed hope for better relations at separate ceremonies marking the 50th anniversary of normalization of diplomatic ties hosted by each other's embassies on Monday.
We more broadly welcome efforts to improve the bilateral relationship between Japan and Korea.
The view was echoed by many American experts. Previous spokesman for the U.S. State Department, Alan Romberg, said the 2 leaders are heading towards mending frayed relations. Japan's refusal to apologize for its sexual enslavement of thousands of Korean women during World War II has been one of the most contentious issues between the 2 countries. Former National Foreign Policy Advisor Victor Cha said President Park and Prime Minister Abe's visit to each other's embassies indicated the possibility for a Korea-Japan summit should trilateral summit talks among Korea, China, and Japan take place in Seoul this year. However, experts say historical issues must be addressed in order for Seoul-Tokyo relations to improve. Dennis Halpin of Johns Hopkins University cited that Abe has taken a bolder stance regarding its past sexual enslavement issues after returning from his Washington trip in April, and that Abe could visit the highly controversial Yasukuni War Shrine that honors several Class A criminals. Analysts say whether or not Abe apologizes for Japan's wartime atrocities in his August statement, marking the end of the 70th anniversary of World War II, could affect the future of bilateral relations. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Korea and Japan held a 3rd round of talks on Tuesday regarding Tokyo's bid for World Heritage recognition of industrial sites built during Japan's colonial rule of Korea. Korea's foreign ministry said Choi Jong-moon, the ambassador for cultural and UNESCO affairs, met with his Japanese counterpart in Tokyo today. Seoul is negotiating the specific details with Tokyo over its campaign for the inclusion of 23 industrial facilities on the UNESCO World Heritage List. Seoul has been asking Tokyo to address the forced slave labor of some 60,000 Koreans at 7 of the 23 sites during the 1940s when Korea was under Japanese colonial rule. Korea is demanding that Japan represent history truthfully in the UNESCO records. And according to Kyodo News Agency, Shinzo Abe, the prime minister, has expressed deep satisfaction with the ongoing discussions to reach a compromise over Japan's bid and said he is looking forward to moving with the current positive momentum and working with Korea to improve bilateral ties. Well, if he wants to do that, it looks like he must be aware that time is running out for Korea's remaining survivors of Japan's wartime sexual enslavement to receive a formal apology from Japan. And so these people are actually taking legal action themselves. 10 former victims and 2 family members of deceased victims plan to file a $20 million lawsuit in a U.S. court in July against the Japanese administration, Japanese firms and a Japanese daily accused of breaching their human rights. The head lawyer in the case said the Kono and Murayama statement, both landmark apologies for Japan's actions during World War II, had repeatedly been either distorted or scaled down during each change of Japanese administration. However, the group is willing to withdraw its suit if the Japanese government issues an apology and compensates the victims. A group of former victims failed previously in the year 2000, that is, to convince a U.S. district court that sexual enslavement was a crime against humanity.
Now, Korea recorded its highest savings rate in almost 2 decades in the first quarter of this year, as more households are resisting the urge to spend amid these unpredictable economic times. Our Shin Se-min has the details.
Koreans are tightening up their belts and putting their money into savings. Central bank and government data show that Korea's total savings rate reached its highest in 17 years in the first quarter of this year, up 1.5 percentage points from the same period last year. It's been steadily picking up pace in recent years after it plunged to 31% in 2002. The total savings rate includes all households, corporate, and the government figures. The increase was driven mostly by households, while the government has saved less and less over the past 3 years. And the reason why Koreans are keeping their wallets closed, the low increase in income and a slow growing economy. Also, the country's rapidly aging population is prompting many to prepare for the future by saving up. Experts say increased savings may be a good sign in the long run.
Saving money allows for spending in the future, but the economy needs a boost now with more consumption and investments.
Last year, Korea's economy grew 3.3%, but the forecast for this year isn't as rosy, with some even forecasting growth to fall to the 2% range. The government is considering whether to create a supplementary budget by the end of this month to drive up the flagging economy. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Millions of people from around the world have been flocking to Milan for this year's World Expo. The Korean pavilion is enjoying great popularity, and this week Korean officials are putting even greater efforts into raising awareness about everything Korea has to offer. Na Young-kyung files this report from that Italian city.
Korea's traditional tune resonates throughout the Sempione Park in central Milan. A night before Korea Day at this year's World Expo, a diverse set of performances took place in front of the symbolic Arch of Peace. This plaza is about 12 kilometers away from the actual expo venue, but it's the perfect place to attract and please the eyes and ears of the locals.
I didn't know about pansori, but I found it similar to Italian vocal music. I also realized Korea's b-boying style is different from what we see here. It was amazing.
I knew a little bit about Korea, but tonight I got to know many new things, including Korea's sports, music, and food. It was energetic, passionate, and the part with the instruments was touching.
The vivid colors of Korea's traditional costume hanbok mesmerized the crowds, while a K-pop b-boying crew immersed visitors in Korean culture. Some might question why cultural performances when the expo theme is food, but there's a reason.
We wanted to show the dynamic side of Korea and its traditional beauty as well. Combining these types of cultural performances makes sense because Korean food, or hanshik, originates from tradition.
It's a chance for those not yet familiar with Korea to get to know the country better and explore many different dimensions of Korea's deep-rooted culture.
On the following day, an official ceremony for the National Day of Korea will take place at the Expo, where around 200 officials from Korea and Italy will gather to highlight Korea's creativity and innovation in the global food sector. Na Hyun-kyung, Arirang News, Milan.
Now for top international headlines, we connect to Paul Yi at the News Center.
Our focus today, Greece inches closer to a breakthrough with its creditors. President Obama sparks controversy with remarks on U.S. race relations, and one of Hollywood's most renowned composers is feared dead in a plane crash.
Well, Paul, let's begin with the latest on the Greek debt crisis. EU leaders say there's been positive steps towards reaching a final agreement in the coming days. We've heard this kind of talk of a deal many times before. So what's different now?
Well, it's simply that they've run out of time. The Greek government and its international creditors have been deadlocked over the last 5 months, but now they have less than 1 week to narrow their differences or else face unprecedented consequences. Following an emergency summit in Brussels, Euro finance ministers are on track to drop a new reform package for approval by EU leaders on Thursday. In a last-minute compromise, Greece proposed it would come up with over $9 billion in higher taxes and spending cuts over the next 2 years. Despite the progress, IMF Director Christine Lagarde said it was too soon to celebrate.
Listen, an enormous amount of work remains to be done. We're working on the basis of a text that features a number of steps forward from the Greek authorities, which is wider and more detailed than what we've seen so far. But there's a lot of work to do in the coming 48 hours. This is certainly not the end of the road.
Earlier, thousands of Greeks rallied in the capital, Athens, for the second time in the past week, voicing their support to stay in the European Union. Greece desperately needs an injection of cash to avoid defaulting on its bailout debts. Its next repayment of about $1.8 billion is due by the end of this month. And shifting to the United States, President Barack Obama is holding nothing back in his latest remarks criticizing racism and gun control in the country. In a podcast interview released on Monday, Obama used a controversial racial slur to describe the current state of U.S. race relations. When asked about the president's highly charged and unusually blunt language, the White House said it was understandably notable.
The president made clear that it's not possible to judge the nation's progress on race issues based solely on an evaluation of our country's manners. The fact is that we've made undeniable progress in this country over the last several decades.
In the meantime, the governor of South Carolina, Nikki Haley, has called on lawmakers to take down the Confederate battle flag in the state capitol. The flag is widely seen as a symbol of pro-slavery during the American Civil War. The move comes a week after the deadly shooting at an African-American church in the city of Charleston by a lone gunman that left 9 people dead. And finally, one of Hollywood's most prolific composers, James Horner, has reportedly died in a plane crash in Southern California. Horner's private aircraft came down on Monday morning in the Los Padres National Forest, triggering a fire that spread over more than 4,000 square meters. Local authorities say there were no survivors. The cause of the crash was not immediately known. The 61-year-old is best known for his music in a string of major films such as Apollo 13 and A Beautiful Mind. Horner also had won 2 Academy Awards for his work on the score for Titanic, including the hit song My Heart Will Go On. And that wraps up our look at international stories for now. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Monsoon rains will begin tomorrow, dropping heavy rains mainly on the southern coastal regions and Jeju Island. And up north, we'll have to wait till Friday to see light monsoon rain falling. So down on Jeju Island, should expect to get the most amount of rainfall, up to 80 millimeters, while mountainous regions could get up to 100 millimeters until Thursday. So with mix of rain and clouds, southern cities will have cooler readings tomorrow, but will be partly to mostly sunny skies in the metro areas. So the ongoing heat wave continues for the capital regions. In fact, the high in Seoul is forecast to be even hotter than Daegu this week, except on Friday, where showers expected. So hot and humid conditions will persist for the time being for the metro regions. So let's take a closer look at tomorrow's readings around the nation. Seoul rises to 30, Daegu and Gwangju get up to 28 and 26, while Busan climbs up to 24 tomorrow afternoon. And as for the other parts, it seems like Daejeon will hit 29, while Jeju and Tokdo see a high of 22 and 23 respectively. Well, for those of you on Jeju Island, have an umbrella handy before heading out tomorrow. Well, that's all for Korea, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
And that brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you for staying with us. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And this has been Daniel Choy. Join us again same time tomorrow. Goodbye for now.